Hello again, and welcome to today's workshop, Getting to Know Graphic Novels, presented by Booklist. My name is Sarah Hunter, and I am the Graphic Novels and Books for Youth editor here at Booklist. We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Penguin Random House Library Marketing and Yen Press, for their generous support of this program. We will send out some additional resources and recommendations from our sponsors in tomorrow's follow-up materials, and we'll showcase some of those resources throughout the program. Before we continue with today's program, I'd like to go over some technical details for anyone just joining us. Links to all of today's slide presentations were included in a reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. We will send PDFs of all these slides along with additional materials from our sponsors to everyone tomorrow. If you have any trouble locating these materials, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable them on your screen, please look for and click the Show Captions icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of them at any time by selecting Caption Settings. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we encourage everyone to submit your questions in the Q&A box. Our panelists will be grabbing questions from this box throughout their presentation, and we will be sure to pass along all unanswered questions to our panelists after the webinar so they can follow up with you via email. The chat box will also remain open throughout the entire program, and we will send the chat messages along with our follow-up materials to everyone tomorrow. And finally, Booklist expects all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately. So let's get started with our final workshop this afternoon, Graphic Novels 101, presented by Soline Holmes. Soline is a librarian and the Information Services Department Chair at Academy of the Sacred Heart in New Orleans, Louisiana. She is the outgoing secretary and was a member at large for ALA's Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable. She is a member of ALSC's Public Awareness and Advocacy Committee, serves on the Louisiana Young Readers' Choice Award Committee for K-2, and is a Teaching with Primary Sources Network mentor. She is currently serving as chair of the USBBY nominating committee for the Astrid Lindgren Memorial Award. She has given presentations on graphic novels, maps, primary sources, global education, and Mother Goose and STEM at local and national conferences. Soline co-authored an article about graphic novels as informational texts for children and libraries, and a chapter in ALA's Mental Health and Children's Literature, evaluating, curating, and sharing books with children. Soline is the proud recipient of a 2019 Judith F. Krug Banned Books Week grant for her school library, was honored to participate in ALSC's 2022 Bill Morris Seminar, and was a member of the second cohort for Online Ready, Designing Culturally Competent and Impactful K-12 Online Learning, sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Take it away, Soline.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you, Booklist, for hosting today's webinar so that we can talk about one of my favorite things in the world, graphic novels. Let me just get my screen shared. All right, can everybody see the screen? I can't see anybody, so if you
it's
can't
still
see
loading,
the screen,
but it's coming.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so yes, welcome back, or if you took a break for a moment, to Getting to Know Graphic Novels. Specifically, welcome to Graphic Novels 101. So this afternoon, we're gonna talk about some of the benefits and features of graphic novels for young readers. I'm also gonna share some programming tips, and throughout, I'm going to be sharing some recommended titles. And so I wanna take us back, very far back in time to start with, because we're talking about what's so special about graphic novels. So just a little bit of history. Here we have the cave paintings in Lascaux, France. They were discovered in 1940, but historians believe that they were from the Upper Paleolithic period, approximately 17,000 years ago. And what do we see there? We see pictures. The cave paintings and engravings show wild horses, deer, wild ox, as well as abstract figures and different shapes. And so historians believe that these images were not just meant to be art, but they were actually meant to convey a story or to tell a message. So maybe were these the first graphics to convey information? Some have described them as the first sequential art, because if you look at them, they actually do go in a sequence, a lot of them, and tell a story. We also have hieroglyphics. These are Egyptian hieroglyphics, but of course, other cultures such as the Mayans also used hieroglyphics as a form of language and communication through pictures. And then by 300 BC, there were approximately 6,000 pictograms, pictographs, or ideograms in Egypt that acted as symbols to represent ideas. And then we get to more recently, how we use graphics today to convey information. So I'm sure we've all seen these, right? The airline safety card that most of us don't actually look at, but it is mostly pictures. There are hardly any words on there that are used to convey information. They are universal. They overcome any language barriers, and the viewer does not need to be able to read or write to understand. And then just recently, after I made this slide, I was on a family vacation and we were at Salisbury Cathedral, and they were talking about the stained glass windows and how the stained glass windows were there to tell a story for people who could not read or write, which I thought was really cool. And I was like, graphic novels. So graphic novels can be seen as an extension of these, because graphic novels tell stories and they convey information using both pictures and text. And this makes them what we call multimodal. So they have the text and the graphics, and those text and the graphics are meant to be read together. And because of this multimodality, it makes graphic novels, they can easily convey emotion and information in a format that's accessible to many readers. Because they're visual, they can clearly show distortions versus reality. They can clearly show emotions, sometimes without even using any words. And sometimes the image alone may convey one meaning and the text might convey another. And so the magic really comes when they are combined. So for example, this is a spread from Debbie Tung's Everything is Okay. And you can see how the text and the pictures work together to evoke emotion in the reader. And the image can convey the meaning more than just the language can. And it helps to build empathy and understanding in the reader. And in many cases, that image may stick with the reader. So maybe especially visual learners might not be able to remember exactly what the words said, but you might call on that image of the woman falling down into this kind of abyss. So as an example of how multimodality works for the reader, this is an example from Katie Monin's Teaching Graphic Novels, which is a fantastic resource that I highly recommend, not just for educators, but also for public librarians for programming ideas. All right, so here you see, well, I'm not going to tell you what you see, but all right, you see this, all right? And then if I add this, it might take on a different meaning than you originally thought. And then here, we have the same apple, but if I add this text, it takes on yet another meaning. And here we have the same apple, and then if I add this, it takes on another meaning. So I will say that sadly, I'm a school librarian, I do still encounter, and I heard Robin and Gregory mention this too, some parents and other educators who frown on graphic novels and complain that they are not real reading. I also even hear this from my students who tell me, oh, no, I can't actually read that graphic novel, or I can't read a comic book because my parents say it's a comic. And so I talk to my students about the benefits of graphic novels. Because they satisfy all different styles, many different learning styles and cognitive differences. The multimodality, like I was just showing, can help readers remember. And they allow for creativity and flexibility. So what I really explain to my students and to anybody I encounter who talks about how graphic novels, kids shouldn't be reading graphic novels, or even adults shouldn't be reading them, but who's going to tell us what to read, right? So I tell them about the creativity and how much imagination is used when we are reading graphic novels. Because as a reader, you are reading the pictures too. And sometimes there aren't words, and your brain, even subconsciously, is working to fill that in, to figure out what's happening, especially in the gutter and the space between the panels. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too. But And so you're actually doing more imagination and you're using more creativity than you might be with a prose novel where it goes through and says, and then this happened, and this happened, and she looked like this, and she smiled. Um, Also, a lot of graphic novels are very diverse. We're finding more diverse creators in the comics world, and many more comic books and graphic novels talk about diverse topics and issues. And so they're creating these windows and mirrors for readers and therefore helping to build empathy. And so through these windows and mirrors, of course, not only are people able to see themselves reflected, but it also helps to erase stigmas and provides this community and this sense of people not feeling alone in the world because they see somebody else who is going through the same thing or has the same feeling. They can be used to educate. There are a lot of nonfiction graphic novels that can be used for all kinds of different topics. I'm going to get into some of those in a little later. They can also be used to teach vocabulary. A lot of graphic novels use really complex vocabulary words that you might not find in a prose book because they have that context of the image. And so people can figure out what the word means by looking at the picture. And so they can use these bigger vocabulary words. And then, of course, kids and adults love graphic novels. Every year, I run statistics in my library of my top checkouts. This past year, 90% of my top checkouts were graphic novels, which makes me super happy. So I want to delve a bit deeper into some of the features of graphic novels that make them so beneficial for readers. And some of this you may already know, but we're just going over it so that we're all on the same page. One of the things I want to stress is that graphic novels are a format, telling a story through sequential art. They are not a genre. And I tell my students this too when I say, like, what's your favorite genre? If they say graphic novels, I'm like, okay, what's your favorite genre? Because the graphic novel is the format that the story is told through. And there are graphic novels for every genre, for science fiction, mystery, nonfiction. Okay, so as we talked about, graphic novels are told through pictures and text. And the pictures are shown through these boxes that you see on the screen called panels. And the space in between each panel is called the gutter. And like prose novels, the graphic novels are read from left to right, top to bottom, as you can see on the arrows there. So you would start at that top panel and follow across the page diagonally down to the left. This is, of course, the opposite if you're reading manga from Japan, of course. And so the text of graphic novels is told through what we call text containers. So we have speech bubbles, and the arrow of the speech bubble is going to point towards the person who's talking so that the reader can understand who is speaking. And then we have thought bubbles. And those are the ones that look more like the clouds with the little dots coming up out of them. And there are also narrative boxes, like you see in this panel from Dogman, that act as the narration or to show a change of time, like they might say meanwhile or the next day. So in reading the graphic novel, it's important to not just read the text, but to also be reading the pictures, looking at the colors used, looking at the facial expressions, the body language. And of course, we do a lot of this subconsciously, right? As you're reading it, you're not thinking like, okay, now let me go back and read the picture, right? We're doing this as we're reading and we're not really thinking about it. But knowing how to read a graphic novel makes them more enjoyable. And one of the things I really love is that many of the graphic novels for young readers now have a section at the beginning or the end showing how to read graphic novels. This one on the left is from a series called Geraldine Pooh, and that's in the I Can Read comics series. And so that one's kind of written geared towards kids, how to read them to themselves. And then Toon Books has a lot of different resources and in the books themselves and the graphic novels themselves about how to read a graphic novel to somebody else. So like if you're a parent or a librarian reading to a child, and then this one shows how to draw a comic strip too. So I go over all of these basics that we've just been talking about with my students each year, even if they're graphic novel fans and love them. And we also talk about the difference between graphic novels and between a comic book, with the idea that graphic novels are usually longer, They usually have a beginning, a middle, and end, whereas comic books come out in issues. They're serialized. A lot of times they will kind of start in the middle of a story, and you might have had to have read the one before, or they'll end with this big cliffhanger, and you've got to, the next week, get the next comic book to find out what happened. All right, so I wanted to share and recommend Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art. If you are new to graphic novels, this is a great resource. If you are already a comics librarian and love comics and graphic novels, this is still a great resource. I go back to it all the time and get new ideas and new understandings about graphic novels. Not only does McCloud go through the history of comics, but he also goes into detail about the elements that make comics and graphic novels really special and how they work as sequential arts. And this past year, he and Raina Telgemeier partnered on the Cartoonist Club, which is written for younger kids. It's middle grade, and it provides much of the same information that is in Understanding Comics, but told through a story. And so in particular, they go into the different creators of comic books and graphic novels and their different roles. Right, because different from just a picture book where there's an author and an illustrator, the graphic novel will maybe have an author, an artist, a colorist, a penciler, and or a letterer. Most graphic novels are very collaborative. And I love sharing this with kids because it's like, if you love graphic novels and comics, there are so many different ways for you to get involved. Maybe you don't think you're a very good artist, but like you have a really good eye for color. So maybe that would be your thing. It's something for the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable that we always try to stress is really the importance of honoring all creators. So whenever I talk about a graphic novel, I try to talk about everybody who worked on it too and give them recognition. And we also try to really promote this with state book awards that might sometimes just give the award or list on the poster like the author, but really important to honor all the creators. So this image is from McCloud's Understanding Comics, and one of the aspects of graphic novels that makes them such a great format is the creator's ability to choose how they depict themselves or the other characters. And McCloud talks about this as universality, and says that the more cartoony a face is, the more people it could be said to describe. And so this universality of characters in graphic novels makes them more relatable to all readers. No matter what you look like, we can easily see ourselves in the character. And the graphic novel style, of course, automatically lends itself to this universality, as you can see from the face that on the end that could be used to portray millions of people or nearly all people on the very end. Of course, some graphic novels use animals as the main characters or pieces of food in the case of pizza and taco, which could make them even more relatable to younger readers. As some examples of this universality, two of my favorites are Hyperbole and a Half, and in Solutions and Other Problems, also by creator Ali Brosh. She shows herself as this little creature with pigtails. Or in Bird Brain, creator Chuck Mullen presents their struggles with depression and anxiety through this pigeon who always has this one floating eye. And Mullen actually said that it's weird, but there's something reassuring about projecting yourself onto something generally disdained and getting an encouraging response to it. You think that if people like this strange little depiction of yourself, then you in your entirety might actually be liked after all, despite your annoying brain trying to convince you otherwise. Another feature of graphic novels is that creators use something called framing, sort of like the director of a film or a TV show, choosing what the reader sees and or whose point of view we're seeing it from. So here we see some more images from McCloud's Understanding Comics. And on the left, where he's showing how you could use over 30 panels to tell every single detail of a story, or you could tell that same story with 4 panels. And the reader is using their imagination, creativity, their experiences themselves from life to fill in everything that is not shown. And you can still get the story, and the creator gets to choose what we see. Whereas in a prose book, it might take pages to describe this one story. But with a graphic novel, the reader has to read the picture and the text at the same time to understand the story. This act of filling in what's not pictured is called closure. So the reader's mind, we do this automatically when we're reading graphic novels and comics. We're automatically filling in the gutter, that space between the panels, and filling in what's happening. So here we have an example of this monster saying, "Now you die," and then we see in the next panel this blood-curdling scream. Now we need a few more panels to really know what's going on, but automatically we're thinking, oh, the monster was, vanquished, or maybe the monster attacked the person. And this makes the reading of graphic novels more interactive because you're, as the reader, thinking more deeply, you're actively reading, helping to build imagination and creativity. And one of my favorite things about graphic novels is that through the visualization and the visual nature of the format, the creator can use externalization. So without using any words, creators can help readers understand a character's emotions. This is Living with Viola by Rosanna Fung. Livy is in middle school. She's the daughter of Chinese immigrant parents, and she's the new girl at school. She's having a really hard time fitting in. And the title character is Viola. And that is actually Livy's anxiety personified through this shadow that follows her everywhere. And Livy can see and hear Viola, and Viola's constantly judging her and telling her, "You're not good enough." Like, this is the first day of school, and she's saying, like, "Oh, first day, Livy, and you're already a disaster." And throughout, we see Livy trying to push Viola away, but it's not until she learns to ask for help that she's really able to face her anxiety and live with Viola. And this idea that Viola's not going to go away, she's going to be kind of hovering in the background now, but she's learned to live with her. And so this is similar in Small Things by Mel Tregoning. And this is a shorter picture book style graphic novel. It's actually wordless, and it's based on the comic strip Night. And a little boy is struggling with feelings of isolation, anxiety, and depression. And these are depicted as these little monsters that follow him everywhere. And you can see here in one of the last images, sort of similar to Viola, they're not ever going to completely go away. Like, the anxiety and the depression can still be there, but we come up with tools and ways to cope with it. And Tregoning's sister said, "I just feel like that image, the one of him in the bed with the little monsters on the side, is so powerful, because if you're looking at it from a mental illness perspective, a lot of people can recover from a mental illness, but it'll always be there. You're not cured from mental illness, but you can learn to cope with it." This is also another example of the externalization. This is Growing Pangs, where Katie's struggling with anxiety and OCD. And when she gets anxious, she starts to hear this buzzing, and she sees these bees buzzing around her. As she gets more upset, the bees kind of take over, as you can see in that bottom image there. And all throughout, they're encouraging her to do things like turn the doorknob a certain amount of times. And you can see how she feels totally overwhelmed. And we get to see what's going on inside her mind. And even though she knows that she feels like her thoughts and the bees are silly and they don't make sense, she's embarrassed to let anyone know about this. And because she worries what other people will think of her. And she says, "I felt like I was the only person in the world who got these thoughts." And she's able to keep the bees at bay once she realizes that other people, like this image in the bottom left, also have these kind of thoughts and feelings that are going on in her head. They have similar thoughts and feelings, and so she then feels less alone. And readers can have that similar feeling of like, "Hey, I do that too," or "I've had that feeling before too," making them feel less alone. But these externalizations don't always have to be a figure or a form. In swim team, Bree's excited for her first day of middle school after moving with her dad from New York to Florida. She is so excited until she's stuck taking Swim 101 as an elective because she doesn't know how to swim and she's terrified of water. At her apartment complex, she almost drowned until she was saved by her neighbor. So she is miserable, and her thoughts start to take over through these warped speech bubbles that kind of look like Dolly-esque, and they've got all caps, and you can see just from the lettering how Bree is feeling. And she has to work her way through these thoughts by literally physically pushing them away to show that she is overcoming them. And again, her negative thoughts are going to still be there, but she realizes that she can overcome them and push them away and be more confident by, through the thought bubbles, telling herself that she's going to be okay, watch your form, focus, stay calm, that kind of thing. And then, so another thing that I love about the text containers is that they can really play a special role in graphic novels because you can have a character saying one thing in a speech bubble, and then they could be thinking something totally different in the thought bubble. Like in the image, she's talking to her principal here, and she's like saying all this, he's saying all this, and she's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But really she's thinking, what is going on? Or here when she's with her friends and she's trying to play it really cool in the speech bubbles we see, but then in the inside, this is a splash panel where you have a full page panel. On the inside, she's just totally excited. And I love being able to read a character's feelings. So earlier, I also mentioned that the graphic novel allows creators to choose what we see and how we see it. These panels are from the golden hour, and Manuel is experiencing PTSD after witnessing gun violence towards his teacher. And through this, I wanted to use this one as an example to show how creators set the mood by using color. And Manuel experiences derealization, where he feels detached and disconnected from his surroundings. And so when he starts to get anxious and have these feelings, these golden lines start appearing, and the panels then become black and white. So we're inside Manuel's head, inside his thoughts now, understanding what he's feeling like. And then he's in the graphic novel, he goes to a therapist, and he learns the technique of grounding and trying to focus on something to ground himself. So he uses photography for this. So in the graphic novel, we gradually see him coming out of this state of trauma where he's focusing on his phone, and the black and white panel starts to add more color a little bit at a time until he's feeling fully grounded, and then it's full color again. This is a different graphic novel from Growing Pangs, but it also uses bees as an externalization. But I wanted to talk about this one to show how color is used as another example of how color is used in graphic novels. So Isaac is also struggling with OCD, but he loves role play games. Unfortunately, his mom won't let him play games. She doesn't think he should be doing that. And so the scenes where Isaac's in real life are mostly in black and white and these gray tones, but then his world comes to life when he's playing these role-playing games. And you can see that because suddenly there's color all around. And sometimes, yes, the bees are still there, but his world is now in color. And we've got these vibrant colors. And so all of these that I just talked about too are a lot of them are realistic fiction or memoirs, but they're also something called graphic medicine. Graphic medicine is a field that's the combination of comics or graphic novels and sequential art and medicine. There's a graphic medicine website, an annual conference, an International Graphic Medicine Award. And so among other uses, graphic medicine is used mainly to educate medical students. For example, comic books have been used to train psychology students, to diagnose psychological disorders. And they found that those who use comic books and graphic novels displayed a better understanding of the course material than those who just learned through the regular textbook. They've also been used for informed consent to help break down language barriers and to educate patients about procedures, about how to take certain medicine, what a disease is, and as a form of therapy. Comics and graphic novels have been used both for the creators as a therapeutic effect, as well as for the patients. These are a couple of examples of like educational graphic novels. We have Let's Talk About It, a graphic guide to mental health, which is published by the Center for Cartoon Studies. Anyone can go online and download it for the suggested price of what is fair. It's told through a series of rabbits who ask questions and then provide answers, asking things like, is anxiety normal? How do I help my friend? It discusses things like what are emotions, what is sigma, what is stress, and it also includes ways to manage that stress. One of my favorites is be nice to your brain. And then the Worry Less book, Feel Strong, Find Calm, and Tame Your Anxiety, is recommended by the publisher for ages to 11, but it's also written for people who worry. So yeah, everyone. It defines different emotions and feelings, and it helps readers understand and recognize when they're having anxiety. And it talks about how some anxiety is actually good. Like if you are being chased by a bear, you should probably have some anxiety there. And then it provides an anxiety toolbox and things to work through anxiety, like grounding, notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, etc. And it talks about how that, it talks about what that does, grounding does to your brain, and how that actually focuses you and gives your mind a chance to calm down. So all of these can be used as mental health resources in your library. I create a mental health corner with coloring sheets and little, I can't think of the word, stress strips where you run your fingers over the, it's a little sticker and it's got a raised texture, and it can kind of help you calm down, and have blank comic panels out there for kids to color and design too. But of course, graphic novels are not just to educate about health issues, but they're graphic novels that teach science. Science Comics publishes several titles a year. They've covered topics such as plagues, aquatic creatures, the digestive system, wild weather. Right below that is Max Axiom's Super Scientist, is a capstone series, and they've got titles about renewable energy, photosynthesis, and that one includes further reading and resources, as well as an experiment at the end. I love the Graphic Prehistoric Animals series. It's exactly what it says. You can get a book about, like a graphic novel about a megalodon or a giant sloth. That's a really cool one. And then Capstone Young Readers Monster Science. They've got Bigfoot and adaptations, vampires and light, and werewolves and states of matter. Lots of fun topics that kids really love to read about. I'm not going to go through all of them. I do love the human body theater because it takes readers through the human body, starting off at the cellular level. So you start really small and they get like really big, because the skeleton is getting dressed for a show, and he gets dressed by adding different organs and talking about what they are, and then eventually puts on his skin. There are a lot of awesome cooking graphic novels out there, and I love a good library cooking program. And a lot of these contain recipes at the end too. Bake Sale is adorable for younger readers and even includes some recipes. The brownies were delicious. And Let's Make Ramen is a great one. It begins with the history of ramen and discusses the different ingredients. And then it provides detailed recipes so that you can make your own. Maker Comics is a series, and that's their cooking one. They're great. They've also got a gardening one, a sustainability one, and they provide a lot of information and kind of have sections in there about, like, here is literally how to, and it's still told in panels and through text containers, but it literally goes through, like, this is how you bake the cookie, and so it's really good. Also, so for social studies and for history and displays in the library, history displays, you can learn about historical events and figures from graphic novels. I've found with my students that it really helps them relate more to characters and to events that maybe took place a long time ago and in a textbook seem totally boring. But when they're actually looking at this character and through that universality, they are it's like humanizing history. The I Survived series, of course, is hugely popular. I can't keep them on my shelves. I love the history comics published by Holiday House. They've got one about the Great Chicago Fire, which even includes at the back a map of all the different sites related to the Chicago Fire. So if you, I had a student that was going to Chicago and wanted to see that because she kind of wanted to follow in some of the footsteps. Action Presidents is a fun series, and Magical History Tour, I don't have up there, but that's also a great one for younger kids. And all of these can help provide historical agency, giving an idea to the reader of how people act in given circumstances. One of my favorites for that is Resistance, which is a 3-book series. The first in the series won a Sidney Taylor honor, and it portrays the French resistance during World War II, but through the eyes of children who lived through it. You can also pair graphic novels with primary sources for book displays and for programming. There are so many graphic novel biographies. I wanted to show you a couple series. Corpse Talk is really popular because it's literally the corpses coming and like talking to the reader. And they've got groundbreaking women, groundbreaking scientists, queens and kings, and other royal rotters. The Show Me History series is really great. I always make a point of when a classroom teacher or somebody is asking for a lot for books about a certain topic, I make sure to include a graphic novel in that as well. And so I use those a lot for our 3rd grade biography project. I have a lot of the Show Me History ones. I also just love Black Heroes of the Wild West, published by Toon Books. It tells 3 separate stories of Black cowboys. And it was really interesting to me, and my students really enjoy that one because they didn't know a lot about it before. These are just a few more that I wanted to share to kind of talk about how anything can be a graphic novel, or you can find a graphic novel in any genre. Terms and Conditions by Robert Sikoriak is a 94-page, it is word for word, the unauthorized adaptation of the Apple iTunes Terms and Conditions. So the thing we never read, you could actually read it because there's a graphic novel version of it. The Constitution Illustrated is by the same creator. It's a really fun way to read the whole Constitution. And then Killer Underwear Invasion is one of my favorites as a librarian. It teaches about information literacy, so about how to find, evaluate, and apply information, all based on this news report that there's going to be a killer underwear invasion. This one was actually on our state book awards list. So a few resources of where to find graphic novels. I know earlier Robin and Gregory were talking a little bit about this, so I'm probably repeating some of what they said, but I would be remiss without mentioning the Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable and their resources. It's an ALA roundtable, but GNCRT creates a lot of lists and programming, and it is available to everyone. You do not need to be a member of ALA. You do not need to be a member of the specific roundtable. Each year, the GNCRT creates an annotated list, including a top 10 list of the best graphic novels for adults and the best graphic novels for children. They've also created several core collaboration lists through partnerships with other groups. In partnership with the Black Caucus, they created the Black Lives, Black Literature Matters list. Most recently, we partnered with Reforma and created a list of comics and graphic novels that showcase Spanish-speaking and Latino populations. And we are currently working with the Rainbow Roundtable to put together the collab list that will come out next year. And then, as they mentioned too, this is going to be the inaugural year, it's super exciting, of the GNCRT's Outstanding Comics Award, which will be given to the creators, all the creators of exceptional graphic novels that appeal to adults, teens, and children. And there will be 3 awards for each age level. There'll be a fiction, nonfiction, and a series award for each of those levels. Of course, Booklist is a great resource, especially their annual guide to graphic novels. Since 2018, Booklist has put out their guide to graphic novels in July, and it includes book reviews, recommendations, as well as articles about comics and graphic novels, how to use them in your library, the benefits of them, history of them sometimes. I just wanted to throw this in because I also do a lot with primary sources, and there's so many ways for libraries to pair primary sources in public libraries and school libraries. The Library of Congress has the largest collection of comics in the US, and a lot of these are available digitally. So you can get them there. You can usually print them out without worrying about the copyright because they're out of copyright. And you can have patrons create their own title or caption. You can break them up as like a puzzle and have people try to put the puzzle together to fit it together. And you can also, of course, compare them with secondary sources, which can just be a really cool way to, like, if you're doing a display, you can include, you know, the primary source about the same topic too. So I talked a little bit about earlier about in graphic medicine, how comics and graphic novels can be a form of therapy. They can be therapeutic. That's both for the reader who feels less alone in reading about people who are experiencing the same thing. But also many people find great relief from and catharsis from drawing, from creating, from telling their own story. And this is from Just Peachy by Holly Chisholm, where all these people, she talks about how everybody was recommending do this, do this, do this. And what really helped was drawing. And so there are lots of resources where you can get blank comic book panels, pages of them. Jarrett Lerner, the one on the right-hand side bottom Jarrett Lerner is from Jarrett Lerner's website. He has tons of resources that he wants people to use, and you can print those out. He'll even sometimes start the comic panel and then you have to finish it. So are you ready to create your own comics? These are a couple books, Adventures in Cartooning and Comics Easy as ABC by Toon Books, are some great resources to get you started if you don't have an idea, or if you want to work with patrons in coming up with your own comic book or Comic-Con where they will create their own comics. And that is me as a comic book character. And I think I am out of time. So I did not have a chance to watch the chat. So can somebody let me know if there were any questions?
There are some questions in the chat, Soline. If you stop sharing, you'll be able to view them. And there was also one in the Q&A box.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So I see one from Nate. Do you recommend any resources on graphic medicine? The graphicmedicine.org website is a really great place to start. And it also lists, I think from that website too, you can get a list of all of their prior award winners. The award has been around for a couple of years, so it's not a ton right now, but they have lists too for collection development. So more tips for incorporating nonfiction graphic novels into a collection. I do a lot with displays. I do a lot of programming around primary sources where I will just show an image to start with, and then I will have kids fill in, like try to discover what's happening in that image, and I will pair graphic novels with that. But as far as other graphic novels, sometimes I'll show just one page of a nonfiction graphic novel, maybe if it's like a historical topic, and have kids try to write the rest or talk about what is happening in it. Dancing at the Pity Party is an awesome one. Okay, separate section for graphic novels. I meant to say that I do have a separate section. I think when I first was a school librarian, I thought, oh, let me incorporate them throughout the collection because that will get people to check out other books too, but they're checking out other books anyway. And really it makes the most sense. I can say, go over here to the graphic novel section, And I don't have any kind of limit on how many graphic novels my students can check out. If they want to check out all graphic novels, that is totally fine. I've read about some people putting like Dogman on Vacation. Please don't do that. Like, that's, if a kid wants to read Dogman every week, let them read Dogman every week. Okay, I'm trying to go back in the chat. Feel free to jump in, Sarah or somebody, if there's something I haven't missing. Oh, the author of Teaching Graphic Novels was Katie Monin. I'm putting it in the chat.
Soline, there's a question about poetry comics, if you have any thoughts about that.
About poetry comics?
Yes.
Yes, there is one that just came out, and it is awesome. It goes through the 4 seasons, and it has comics of like that, like it talks about the 4 seasons, and each poem is about one of the seasons. I'm trying to remember the title. But I think that's a great way for programming too. If you're doing like a program about poetry, you could have your patrons also like illustrate their poem. I'm trying to look up the title of that one. Oh, it's called Poetry Comics. And I love it so much because it was one of the only times I've seen a graphic novel poetry collection. So if there are others out there, please throw it in there. Wildflower Emily. Okay, that one sounds good too. I need to read that. I do have a fiction and a nonfiction GN section. I do recommend that. Because just the way I have the rest of my collection, I've got, my fiction chapter books and my nonfiction section. And kids will equally check out the nonfiction graphic novels as the fiction. It just makes it easier for me to find and reshelve them. Or if somebody's looking for a particular topic, it makes it easier for me to have it separated out. I will say that my graphic novel shelf has grown so much, and now that everything was returned at the beginning of the summer, I've got a stack on the shelf, and so I need to expand and kind of shift everything over a little bit. Yay for just beginning to publish graphic novels. As a library, I definitely prefer hardcover because they last longer. And I mean, if it's only available in paperback, I will get it. I just got a bunch of Cheese Sweet Home, and but I did have to replace the one that I had gotten the year before because it had already gotten destroyed. So there was something in the Q&A. Let me look in the Q&A. Okay. Placing DC and Marvel comics into their own section and then the rest on their own browsing shelf. Has anyone attempted this? Do you think this could be an effective change? The goal would be to make the graphic novel collection beyond superhero comics more accessible. There's so many hidden gems. Yes. I do not have a ton because like DC and Marvel are not hugely popular in my library, so I don't have a ton. So I just have them mixed in. But I have been to a lot of public libraries in New Orleans where they are separated out and have their own section. So if anybody else wants to chime in on that too, that has more experience with that. Nonfiction with the other nonfiction graphic novels with the other nonfiction titles. Because sometimes my students want just a graphic novel, and I actually find that they're like, if in my nonfiction collection, if they're looking for a particular topic, they will like check that out. But otherwise, my nonfiction section, they're not going to go just read the biography of Harriet Tubman just to read it. But if it's on the graphic novel shelf under the nonfiction section, they will check it out and think like, oh, here's a graphic novel I haven't read yet. Let me try this one out. So that's my theory behind it. Okay, yeah, separate section for comics originally published as serials. I love good back matter. So yes, I do recommend that publishers include bonus educational materials at the back or online, because I think, especially for school librarians, that really helps, and having more resources. And there are a lot of kids who read the graphic novel and then they're like, well, wait, I want to know more. And they will go and get those other books, even if they're not graphic novels. As far as cataloging for the graphic nonfiction, I use the Dewey call numbers and I just have them in order on the shelf as far as that. Does that answer the question or?
Can I chime in on that one about cataloging nonfiction?
Yeah.
There's like a comics Dewey number, but then for nonfiction, would they be cataloged under the nonfiction subject Dewey number as opposed to the comics Dewey number?
Yeah, so I don't, I re-catalog mine actually, not using the comics call number. And I just do them like for the fiction ones, I do FIC, first three letters of the creator's last name. And then for the nonfiction, I would do like, if it's one about dogs, like 636.7. Yes, yes, the music Dewey. Or like if it's a biography, it's in 921. Okay, J author, Dewey number, graphic. Okay, yeah, and all of mine also have a little graphic novel sticker on it too. Because I have had some people reshelve them in with the rest of the collection, and it just makes it easy to find them. All right, one more question if there is one more question. Yeah, and I have to say, my students are pre-K through, well, kindergarten through fourth grade checkout. I have tried to get them into manga, and honestly, I don't know if it's because they're just kind of learning how to read from left to right, but I have not gotten them to get very into it. So I only have like, I don't know, a handful of manga titles right now. But yeah, I would separate the manga probably from the rest of the collection once I get more. Yeah, there are a fair amount now of the beginning readers that are more graphic. That like the easy comics, I can read comics series. And I think it's because they're realizing what kids are wanting to read. Parents resistant to yes and no, but as soon as I talk to a parent, like if they talk to me about it, I am there with research to tell them why graphic novels are so beneficial. We live in a very visual world now. So it's important that kids get visual literacy, and they're getting that from graphic novels.
Thanks so much, Celine. I think that's probably all we have time for today. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us. And also, as a reminder, if there were any questions that we did not get around to answering, we will pass them along to all the panelists. We appreciate all of your time and hope that these workshops were helpful for you and for your staff. As a reminder, all 3 sessions in today's workshop were recorded, and every recording will be sent out to registrants tomorrow. So if you missed any session or would like to revisit one, you'll be able to do so. And that is a wrap. We'd like to thank our wonderful panelists again for their time and expertise. We couldn't have done it without them. And to our sponsors, Penguin Random House Library Marketing and Yen Press for their generous support. See you next time.